Hi, my name is Dale Maley. In this video, we're going to review how I got the Strevell House in Pontiac, Illinois on the National Register of Historic Places. And the Strevell House picture is shown here. It's at 401 West Livingston Street in Pontiac, Illinois, and it was built around 1855. Hopefully this video will give you some pointers, because it's probably going to take you a year to get your property on the National Register, and maybe you can save some time if you look through what my experience was. One thing that I had to learn was getting a house added to the National Register is a journey. It's not something you do quickly. Why is that? Well, it's a joint state and federal government project, and I didn't know, but you have to have state approval before you can fill out the federal form to get your property added to the National Register. Now, I was trained as an engineer, and one of the most helpful tools to help on any project is to do a flowchart of the project. So I'm going to run through the steps rather quickly right now, then we'll go back and focus on each one of those and further explain them. So I would recommend the first thing you do is research the house history, and that includes the family history of the people that lived in the house, because you're going to need that for this process. Once you've done that, you're probably going to have to fill out a preliminary state level approval form. In my case, it's Illinois, but I think all the states are similar. Then after you receive that state preliminary approval, they will let you start to fill out the federal form, which is the final form. Then right away you're going to have to decide on, there's 4 criteria to get your house on the National Register, and you're going to have to figure out which one you want to apply for. Then I'd highly recommend you find some similar completed forms that for properties or houses that are similar to yours. The next step in the process is photographing the interior and the exterior of your house, and you will need that to fill out the federal form. You're also going to need to make some diagrams that are needed for the form. And once you get the form completed, you're going to have to get that form approved from your state level coordinator. And you may have to revise that form until the state person approves it. In my case, that form was 51 pages long. Once you get it approved with your state representative, then you're likely going to have to make a PowerPoint, because the state will have a meeting to vote on whether to send it on to the feds, and they like a PowerPoint presentation at that voting meeting. The next step is someone, either you and or your state representative, will have to present your house at the state voting meeting. Hopefully that state team votes and passes your application and sends it on to the feds. And by law, the feds must approve or reject your application within 45 days. Once the feds approve it, at that point I would suggest you could purchase any signs you want to put on your property that has been added to the National Register. Then I would highly suggest some type of celebration, maybe the team that helped you do it, or your local politicians, or your historical society, whatever the group is, but have a celebration. And then you're going to find out the feds are way behind on making copies of your approved form available, and you probably will have to have your state person give you a PDF copy of your approved application and what property number was assigned to it. Now that's the end of the flowchart process, so let's go back in and look at each steps that we quickly reviewed on the flowchart. If you remember, that first step was to research the house history. So you need to research the history of the house ownership. You probably want to figure out the family genealogy of the key owners that you're interested in. In Illinois and probably other states, they want you to know the Native American history before the house was built. You might want to check similar completed applications to see how they did the history section on their form. In my case, I decided to research and then write a book about the house and the key families. And once I wrote the book, then I had everything I needed to do the National Register. You can also hire an architect to research and complete the form, but it's very high cost. When I started my process, the state of Illinois sent me a list of 50 different architects I could hire. The next step in the flowchart that we're going to look at is filling out the preliminary state approval form. And you might ask, why is the state form required before you can fill out the final federal form? My guess is the state officials don't want to waste their time, number one, on projects that don't really qualify, or number two, the applicant's not really a serious person applying for this. So contact your state office and they will send you the preliminary form. It's not too bad to fill out. In my case, it was only 4 pages long. And if you want to see what mine looked like, I uploaded a copy to a website called archive.org, and that's the internet address there. You can actually get a copy of what my preliminary form was. Now, once the state approves your preliminary application, you're ready to start filling out the federal form. I would highly suggest that you find some approved forms for houses that are similar to yours, and they can be in your state or they can be in other states. And once a house is approved on the National Register, the feds are supposed to make a PDF copy of that application available to the general public. It's public information. However, what you're probably going to find, if it's a more recent one, the feds are so far behind you can't find the PDF copy of the application. So once you find some similar properties, ask your state officials for a PDF copy if you can't find one at the Fed website. It's highly likely they can get you a copy, which is what I had to do. In fact, I'm in Illinois and I had a house in Michigan. I had to contact the state officials in Michigan and they sent me a copy, no problem, because it wasn't available from the feds. They can be very helpful in learning architect's lingo for house architectural terms. If your property's if you're proposing to add it for architectural reasons, you're going to have to learn architect's lingo. The next step you'll find on the federal form, you're going to have to decide which of the 4 criteria you want your property to apply under. And you only need one of the 4 to get the house listed. Now, I initially went for 2 of the 4 criteria, architecture and a famous person lived there, but I got rejected by the state rep on the famous person side. That's a whole other story we don't have time for on this video. But anyway, she suggested I just go back to architecture only and I would easily qualify. So that's what I did. So if you're in doubt as to which of the 4 criterion to apply for, I would suggest talking with your state rep for guidance. The next step in the process to photograph the interior and exterior of the house, and you'll need those for the federal form. And that federal form has very specific instructions of how to label each of the photos and how to include them with the application. So please follow their directions. And on my 51-page federal application, 14 of those were basically text that I was filling out the form, and 37 pages were diagrams and photos. So 51 pages sounds pretty daunting, but if you realize that 37 pages were diagrams and photos and only 14 were text, doesn't sound so bad. The next step in the process of filling out the federal form, you're going to find out you need to make some diagrams for that form. And the form has specific instructions for what diagrams are needed. Some typical diagrams include floor plans of the house, 2 scale drawings of the house with the trees shown on the lot, etc. Once you get the federal form approved from the state level coordinator, or I should say, you're going to have to get that approved by the state coordinator, and you may have to revise it a couple times before he or she approves it. In my case, my form was 51 pages long, and I was actually rejected on my first submittal. And my state rep did not think the famous persons who lived in the house were famous enough. And she basically suggested go back to just unique architecture, and then I would easily qualify. So I took her advice. I unchecked the box for the famous person, and I only applied for unique architecture. Once I did that, the state rep approved my form with only a couple of minor changes that she made. The next step in the overall process, I had to make a PowerPoint for the state review committee. Now in Illinois, our state board has 13 members. If I remember right, about 2 of those are the reps. They're state of Illinois employees. They work with the applicants to get the forms ready. So I made a PowerPoint which explained my house and my project. However, I let my state rep actually present it at the meeting, and I was afraid I might have computer problems using remote access. They also have specific rules for how you make the presentation. So in my case, I made the PowerPoint, but my state rep, she gave the presentation and actually did an excellent job. And as soon as our PowerPoint was done, we had 2 simple questions which we answered, and they voted 13-0 to approve and then send it on to the Fed for the final step in the process. So once you present your house at the state voting meeting and the state team votes to pass your application to send it on to the Feds, after they send it, the Feds by law, they must approve or reject your application within 45 days. I don't know if that's 45 working days or 45 calendar days. I really don't know. They actually approved mine in about 30 calendar days, if I remember right. And that was in April of 2023. If you'd like to see a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that we showed to the voting meeting, I upload that to archive.org, and you can use that internet address shown on the screen to access a copy of what we showed about our house. So once you receive federal approval on your application, then you can purchase any signs you want to add to the house or the property indicating it has been added to the National Register. So I waited until I got the email saying the federal approval was done before I actually ordered my sign. And I selected Franklin bronze plaques to get my sign from. In my case, it's 18 by 20 inches in size, pretty good size sign. Bronze, it was $1,400 as of May of 2023. And I was a little bit surprised. It was a 7 to 9 week delivery period. So it's not something you get in just a couple of weeks. So you've basically made it through the process, but you probably would like to have a PDF file of your approved application and also what property number was assigned to your house or property. And as I've said before, the Feds are several years behind making those PDF copies available to the public. So what you can do is contact your state rep. They could send you a PDF copy, and they can also give you the property number which was assigned by the Feds. In my case, the Strevell House in Pontiac was assigned property number SG100008845. And I uploaded a copy of our application to archive.org, and you can use that internet address to get a PDF copy of our file. And once a property is approved, those applications become public information. Now, you might be wondering, how much time should I set aside in the project for researching the house history and the family history? Well, in my case, here's a timeline, and I actually did the research and then wrote the book shown on the right. So this started on July 22nd. I started the project. It took me about 14 weeks. I ended up with 200 pages in the book. I spent about 30 days worth of man hours doing the research and writing it. So you can see you should allow 14 weeks. And I was very lucky because another gentleman had spent 10 years researching the family and made all his research available to me, so that probably saved me quite a bit of time. So 14 weeks I think is relatively fast to do the research. Now here's a timeline for the overall project in my case. And you can see up here, I started doing the book research or the family and house history research in July. And then I got the preliminary application submitted in, looks like, September. And then it took me until mid-October, November-ish to get the first federal application submitted. And then I had to revise that and just go to one of the 4 boxes on architecture. and then I got that accepted before the end of 2022. I had to have the voting meeting with the state officials. I had to make a presentation for that, and that happened in February. So it was sent to Washington, D.C., and it was accepted on April 12th of this year, 2023, and there you can see the property number that was assigned. So you're talking about roughly a 7-8 month process here, and I think that's pretty quick because I'm a pretty good researcher on the history side, plus I had the advantage of another gentleman who had researched 10 years on the family history. So it's not a simple process, and it is relatively time consuming to do the research and also fill out the application and get it passed. So looking back over the process, you might wonder what were my biggest obstacles in my process. Well, it was not doing the family or house histories. That was the easy part. I'm an engineer, and I have our own lingo in engineering, and I found out that architects have their own lingo, and it's completely different than engineering. So I had to take a kind of a crash course, Architecture 101, in my case to learn about Carpenter Gothic architecture and all the features of that. So that was kind of a stumbling block for me. Also, learning what integrity means on the form. And you have to remember, it's architects that are judging your application, so it needs to be in the lingo they're used to. Integrity, as far as I understand it, means does the building still represent today the way that it did back in the period of interest? So in other words, if the home was completely remodeled on the exterior and exterior and interior, and there's nothing left of the original, that's poor integrity. If it pretty much looks like the way it did back 100 years ago when you were interested in it, then it has high integrity. I also had to learn which of the 4 boxes to choose. In my case, I had to choose just architecture and not choose the famous person form. And I don't think the instructions you get from the federal form are very user-friendly to novices to the process. I have a bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering. I have an MBA. I'm pretty well educated, and yet I had to really struggle with the instructions and the terminology used there. So here are some of my closing thoughts on this overall process. It is not a short and easy process, and you have to allow enough time to research both the house history and the family history. You also have to allow enough time to complete the federal application, including any revisions you might have to make. And it took me about 10 months for the whole process, and I think that's relatively fast because I had the advantage in that a gentleman named Collins Miller had spent 10 years researching the house and family history before I started, and he generously let me use all of his research materials. So in summary, this video explains how I added a house to the National Register of Historic Places. Hopefully, it will help you on your journey to get a house or property added to the National Register. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe. Thank you.